Hello and welcome to the Bonsai Garden. This is my oak seedling that I planted up into this funky fish pot about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And you can see that because I accidentally cracked the pot, I had to conduct some kintsugi repair on there. And these young oak seedlings make me think of palm trees with their single trunk and the big leaves. And this one's got some lovely movement in the lower trunk. Immediately next to that, we've got a Chinese juniper cutting. It's a cutting I took from one of my larger trees last year. I potted it up into some potting mix and it rooted. And so again, a couple of weeks ago, I planted it into this little Zisha bonsai pot. This Chinese elm is putting on some extension growth again, so I just need to trim that back. And this pyracantha, which sat next to it in this lovely yellow pot, I'm actually thinking of putting into a pond basket in spring and trying to fatten that up and let that grow on for a couple of years. Otherwise it's just going to forever remain a stick in a pot. It's the classic example of rushing to put a plant into a bonsai pot. Hello and welcome to the Bonsai Garden. It's currently the middle of October, and where I am in the UK, although we've had quite a lot of rain over the last month or so, I am still under a hosepipe ban. What that means is that I've been having to water my trees with a watering can. Fortunately, because of the rain, I haven't had to do that as often as I might otherwise have done. What it does mean is that I've been able to provide a liquid seaweed food to my trees as I've been watering. Keep watching, and I'm going to do a summary of where things are at with my trees and do a quick review around my bonsai benches. So just starting off on the table here, the first thing to note is that I am running out of space in the garden, and I need to think about some more monkey poles and some more display areas for the trees, and that's really why the trees are starting to accumulate on the table here. And I have got some wood to make some more monkey poles, some display stands for the bonsai trees, and I just need to get around to making those shortly. So on here I've got these trays of maple seedlings, which are from last year. I've got my Yamamomiji mountain maple, which looking a little bit dry and crisp on some of the leaves. I'm waiting for the leaves really to fall from it so I can take a proper look at it structurally and decide where I might want to place some of the branches. Now, what I did find this year was that as the leaves emerged in spring on this tree, it did grow really quite vigorously and quite quickly in the first couple of months of the year. I removed some of that foliage and some of the branching and the new growth, and the second sort of flush of growth was much slower. So I am expecting something very similar next year. And at one point this tree was perhaps 6 inches taller in all directions than it is, and looking quite scruffy and overgrown, and it's been much sort of calmer since that was cut back, and the second flush was much slower. Just behind that we've got some of the pines. So there's the Japanese white pine here, and I'm really in a position now where I'm going to probably pot this and my other Japanese white pines into the tea house, so they're just under cover, so they don't get quite so much rain and moisture over the coming months. Japanese white pine, they're not so much of a fan of having their roots wet. I don't think that's such an issue with the black pines. Here's the other tray of Japanese maple seeds, which I just need to put out of the way now and just see how that develops come spring next year. The little Chinese juniper, which was an heir layering from a larger tree, I'm quite happy with that. I'm fairly certain that that's going to survive through winter. The roots are going to develop, and I'm going to be able to start working on that and doing brand selection, pruning and styling next year. This is my cascade juniper. I still need to apply some wire to that just to put some shape back into this cascade bit. And again, the development on this has been quite slow. I think that's probably down to the particular type of juniper that it is. Maybe I need to pinch out some of the growing tips just to try and get denser foliage on here, because at the moment it's a bit sort of stringy. There's not a lot of foliage there. Just behind that, if I work my way around, I've got one of my Hawthorn trees. And in terms of ramification, that's come along quite nicely. The only issue with this is that it's got a very long, thin, slender trunk, and this is a tree which might benefit from being planted in the ground, which is a possibility. So I think this again is perhaps another one of those trees where I was a bit eager to get it into a bonsai pot, and perhaps needed to work on fattening it up first. So that's definitely a possibility for next spring. And just round past there, we've got my black pines. This is one that I got from Hidori Bonsai Sales Group. And I did just take off the tips of a couple of these because I don't want them growing much further at the moment. I have got various branches on here that are sacrificial branches to help thicken up the trunk. I am still very unfamiliar with black pines and how to treat them and look after them. I did go through and remove some of the older needles, but in terms of doing proper bud selection, needle pinching, all that kind of thing, I'm very much learning as I go, and I've got an awful lot more to learn with that. Immediately next to it is the young black pine, which I got from a grower in Hull who's on eBay. It's got a number of trees that are very similar. Again, I've just taken the tips out of some of these candles in the hope that that will put some of the growth further back. And I've also planted it into a pond basket, which will do it a lot of good for the roots. And in fact, I was thinking about doing the same with this one as well. Take it out of the ceramic pot, put it into a basket. A lot of growers grow these things in like kitchen colanders, just to make sure that the water drains through and there's plenty of aeration to the roots. And it's a case of building a strong root system, which will then feed up into the rest of the plant. And just down here on the floor on the patio, I've got another collection of trees, and again this is an example of where I'm running out of room in the garden. This is the chocolate birch, and it had some pretty impressive coloration on the leaves. You can see here it was sort of dark green in the centre of the leaf, with the yellow outer part, and all of the leaves went like that. And you can see that the leaves have started falling from there as we head into autumn. Just behind that I've got my liquid amber tree, and I had expected that perhaps the leaves on there might have gone a sort of reddy orange colour, and I think I can just see on the tips of the leaves and on this larger leaf here it is starting to assume that red colour. So that's one to watch over the next month. Just behind that I've got a quince, which I will plant up in spring. And I've got a couple of Japanese maples here. First of all, there's the Orange Dream just in the middle there. That's destined to go into my Orange Dream forest planting to replace the tree that died earlier in the year. Next to that we've got a Japanese maple bloodgood, which was initially bought as a garden tree, and I haven't really decided where to put that yet. And I've also got a number of going green or something similar Japanese maple, and the idea is with those to try a Kabudachi clump style in spring. I have an Atropurpureum clump style which did quite well until this year, when I transplanted that from the basket it was in into a more shallow bonsai tray. It hasn't done particularly well since doing that, so the lesson learned there is perhaps it needed to be in a deeper tray for the time being until it was more established. I'm not sure that all of the trunks had fused in that either, so it was a bit of a failed experiment, and I'm going to give it another go. Here we've got a contorted hazel, which was a bit of an experiment. I picked it up for perhaps about £10 from the local garden centre, trimmed off some of the upper growth and tried to add some taper into that. Now they naturally grow with a very sort of twisted branching, so potentially it could create an interesting looking bonsai, but it does have quite large leaves on it at the moment. So it's a question of, can I develop the ramification and the branching in a sort of controlled manner, and also can I reduce the leaves on this? And that will be an interesting one to watch next year. On top of the storage area here, we've got on the far end here a beech, which I was trying to graft a new branch onto. I'm not sure that's been overly successful. That was a thread graft, but I sort of damaged the bark, and it's become more of a sort of approach graft where the branch is on the side of the tree rather than growing through the middle of it. Really, I just need to see how that develops next year. In front of that there, got another Japanese maple, which will become part of the Kabudachi clump style. Here's my $50 or £50 challenge tree. A couple of the branches there appear to have died off. The rest of the tree seems fairly healthy, so I probably just need to trim that, clean that up. I'll probably leave it till spring before I do anything with it at all. Here are my trays of seedlings and cuttings from the end of last year and also the beginning of this year. It includes some Chinese elm cuttings, and you've already seen one of those which I planted up into a little Zisha pot, which is in the porchway to my house. There's one or two left in there that need planting up at some point. I'm not necessarily in a hurry to do that. At the back there, we've got a cherry tree just behind the pond basket. I haven't really done anything with that this year. and just fattening the trunk up, and it's currently sat in a garden plant pot, so that may well go into the basket which it's sat in spring, and just try and fatten that up. Just in front of that, that's a azalea. Underneath my large garden olive tree, there is a small olive tree which I got from the garden centre in spring this year, and I planted up into this little ceramic pot. Wired some of the branches up into position, trimmed back some of the growth, and it seems to be quite happy at the moment. You can see that it's got on there lots of tiny little olives. So again, and one which will be interesting to see how that develops next year. Just coming to the front of that, there's an Irene Japanese maple. It's looking a bit dry on there. That might well just be the time of year. There's still green cambium there, so I'm not concerned about that. I think that will just bud out nicely in spring. To the side here, we've got one of my Buddhist pines. These have always been quite slow growers for me, but I can see that this I trimmed down here earlier this year because this particular branch is growing out quite long, so I wanted to shorten it. But it has budded back, and it has had a bit of new growth in there, which is interesting. These do tend to suffer with moth caterpillars, which get into these sort of florets of leaves and chomp away at them. This one's looking okay at the moment. Now, a lot of people consider these to be indoor trees. I've always left mine outside in the garden. Perhaps that explains why they develop quite slowly for me. I don't know. But I've certainly had them outside in snow and frost and ice, and they've survived quite happily. They're a tree which apparently doesn't like the roots bothering too much, and I'm not proposing to do anything in terms of repotting with this particular one, but the larger one I have hasn't been repotted, certainly by myself, since I've had it for about two and a half years. So that's something I might need to look at next year. Just surveying things here. Here's one of the Chinese juniper cuttings which I planted up into a pot. I'm going to train that into a cascade. We've got a holly here, which is a bit sort of a nondescript tree which I rescued from a garden centre, took pity on it. It's never really done anything. It's never going to be a particularly spectacular tree. Not really a lot I can say about that. Here's another one of the azaleas, which has a nice pink or purple flower on it in spring. Next to that is a cotoneaster, and you can see that it's beginning to get the autumn colour to the leaves. So although it does keep the leaves on over winter, they do tend to sort of yellow off, and it does lose some of those leaves. Here's the little Chinese elm that's always been a little bit slow, and it is looking a bit happier here. It does seem to put on a bit more foliage of late. In front of that is one of the little Mame juniper seedlings, which has dried out and died during the hot summer that we had. It obviously needed a lot more care in terms of watering. It might have benefited from being sat in a gravel tray to increase the humidity. So lesson learned there. Next to that is, I've always assumed this was a sycamore, but I'm wondering if it might be a Norway maple. This has grown from the seeds which fell from my neighbour's tree, and this tree now I think is about 2 or 3 years old. And as you can see, it's got to that time of year now, the leaves have coloured up, dried off, and they're beginning to fall off. And the one that I've got in the porch, the leaves have already dropped on that particular one. Here's my Herons crabapple, and you can see that the leaves have also started going on here. The leaves that are still on, going yellow and falling. and we've got lots of these little red apples. This is my Greenwood satsuki azalea, or satsuki azalea, and that's looking quite happy at the moment. I am expecting that some of the leaves will sort of colour up, and you can see that it's got hints of yellow through there, where some of the older leaves are dying off. But it's also setting buds and flowers for next year, so if I zoom in there, that will be next year's flower, and same in there and in there behind it. This is one of my oak seedlings, and you can see I put an extreme twist in there. I can just see that at the base of the plant we've got a sucker developing with a leaf, so I will be taking that out. The intention that this will always be maintained as a shohin tree. I believe that oak make for larger bonsai, but I'm quite happy with this one at the moment and this size. I'm not looking for something that looks particularly like a natural oak tree. I am looking for something that's a bit more managed and a bit more artificial looking, if you like. I mean, after all, the extreme corkscrew in the trunk doesn't necessarily suggest natural oak tree, does it? What I like about these is that as they're developing, they look a little bit like little palm trees on desert islands, and I'm quite happy to cultivate it and develop it, continue along those lines. So it might be one of those where if it starts getting a bit out of hand, I might need to cut things back and regrow it again to get the same effect. We've got here one of my Fuji cherries, and this was the tree, it was the base of another tree which I air layered the top off there, and that became my triple trunk kojo no me, which I'll show you shortly, in a lovely Tom Butterworth pot with this sort of minty green glaze to it. I did notice that Tom, who's one of my favourite bonsai potters, has just finished a new batch of pots which he's putting onto his website and onto eBay today actually. There are some really nice new glazes that he's tried out. It's very worthwhile taking a look, and he's definitely somebody who I think is worthwhile of your support. So I'll put a link below. Please go to his website and take a look in case there's anything there that might take your fancy, and please support him. Immediately next to that I've got a couple of Chinese elms. This was a supermarket tree which I bought for £10. It's got an unusually thick tapering trunk for one of those supermarket trees, which is what attracted me to it in the first place. And I've just been keeping up to sort of trimming back the new growth, and it has become increasingly twiggy, and I'll just continue more of the same next year. Not an awful lot going on with this one at the moment. I am planning on putting it into some different soil next year. I'm not quite sure what this is that it's planted into. It looks quite unusual. I quite like the sort of twisted, contorted trunk on that. It's perhaps a bit of a stereotypical S-shaped Chinese elm, but I do quite like that. It's definitely got some motion in there, and it's just really one that just needs slowly bringing on over the next couple of years. There are a couple of points in there that I can see where there are multiple branches emerging from the same spot, so I will need to do some branch selection on that. For the time being, I'm quite happy to just let that develop. Just in the back here, sat underneath my large cherry tree, garden tree, is another kojo no me Fuji cherry. So this is my literati windswept in the corner, and you can see that the leaves are falling from that. It's just that time of the year. In front of that we've got the Chinese juniper from which I separated the air layer. I put a bit of wire on that just to reposition some of the branches and fill in some of the negative space that's been created by removing the apex of the tree. And I just need to let that develop into next year and try and fill in some of that space. Decide where I'm placing the branches. Just behind that there, that's the dwarf azalea, which I suspect that in all the time that I've had it, it's been slowly dwindling away, and it may well be dead now. Although, to be honest, last year I also thought the same, but it did flower, much to my surprise, in May time. But it may well be that the tree had reserves of energy sufficient to push out the flowers, and it may well be that those reserves have now been used up. It certainly doesn't appear to have any conventional looking leaves, and hasn't had this year, in order to get reserves of energy and to store those. So it may well be that that tree is a goner. In any event, I've got a lovely blue pot there. I can put something else in if that turns out to be the case.